Hello everyone, Christina here, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Chats. As is usually going to be the case, probably I'm actually recording this on a Wednesday, so well in advance. I've got time, so I'm doing it. But I wanted to make another video. Well, I wanted to go back to doing this properly. I wanted to go back to doing this full time. So I figured I would make a video explaining my relationship between my faith and my sort of newfound gender identity. As honestly is usually the case, I'm doing this relatively off the cuff. So there's no pre-prepared script. We're not that high end, I'm afraid, but nevertheless, I'm here just to explain how I've found things, how things have been. So yeah, I think the first thing that I want to say is that, strangely enough, this realization for a large period of time actually made faith easier to deal with. I was starting from a bit of an interesting sort of starting point. For context, I am bi as well, so I swing both ways. I like men and women. And back when I thought I was a guy, that caused me a significant amount of distress, because I thought that those desires would be sinful to act upon. And actually, not to get too personal, but a fair... Oh, by the way, just for context, the reason why I look like I've been mugged from the lips down is because I did an awful job shaving this morning, and my makeup's coming off because, you'll excuse me, it's very hot today. I say very hot, it's probably like 20 degrees, but I'm half Slavic by blood, give me a break. But no, at the time, thinking, at the time I was much more worried about basically whether I was liked guys and whether that was sinful. And so, in a strange way, the sort of process of realizing or deciding whether I was trans, realizing is probably better actually, that I was trans, ended up being, made things easier, because it's like, when you don't really know what it means to be gay, like whether it would be gay to like men or women, because you don't know whether you're a man or a woman. The struggle of is it wrong to like is it wrong to like guys starts being a sort of nothing question when you don't know whether you are one. And for the record, to say now, I am of the affirming view that there's nothing wrong. Strange that I'd say this, all things considered, but I don't think there's anything wrong with same-sex relations. What do you want me to do, man? But no. So yeah, that's possibly the first thing that I would note. However, for me, it was a bit I had the realization, and it was relieving for a second, and then I started to realize how much I'd missed out on, and how much better my life would have been if I was born the sort of right way. And so, eventually the question did arise of essentially why on earth God would make me this way, and seemingly throw me a bunch of suffering for no reason. And that's just the problem of evil, but applied to my specific situation. But that's why me, God, is the question that everyone asks when they're going through something. Everyone that believes in God, at least. I'm no different. And funnily enough, an answer sort of quite quickly made its way to me. Since then, things have my view has been altered from time to time. But one thing that helped is that I have now found that multiple people who would consider themselves Christian and would consider themselves queer have come to me and asked me how I cope with it, or for some sort of support, or maybe it's been closer people to me who haven't directly asked me, but I've been able to continually support them through that struggle, and it is a genuine struggle. Even if you're relatively content with yourself, it can be a hell of a thing. So yeah, that was of immense help, frankly. It really was, because it felt like there was some good, some purpose in what I was enduring. If I was born a cisgender man or a cisgender woman, then I wouldn't be in a position where I could help these people. And that in of itself isn't sufficient, right? Arguably, because you can just say, oh well, what if no one dealt with that at all? And that's not, that wouldn't be a ridiculous counter remark to make. So from there, it very much became a process of, or it very much became sort of looking at it from the angle of like the fall, right? Genesis. I don't know if people are familiar with the idea of the fall. Now, most Christians don't now interpret it to be a literal event as much as a pardon me, gonna pause for a second, and we're back. As much as the majority of modern Christians now interpret the idea of like Genesis and the fall, and I say the majority, there's still a fair portion that would consider it literal, but the majority now consider it a more metaphorical story about how evil ultimately sort of bleeds into the world as a result of our own actions. That's how I like to see it, is not everything is sort of directly caused by our own actions, but when we do wrong, we sort of widen and this is a whole thing for another time, but the way that I've began to see the fall is that essentially our wrongdoing is simply widening the rift between us and God, which I spoke about it, and I sort of used when I made my Easter video for last Sunday, I used a sort of penal substitution was really the doctrine that I was relying on, and that's the idea of like a need to restore like a justice to the world, and a need for guilt to be punished. And this has traditionally been quite a strong Christian idea. Perhaps I spoke of it wrongly, or I spoke of it in this fashion rather than the way that I actually. So this is getting very based on the fall, but hey, I'm happy to explain it. Penal substitution is the idea that guilt and innocence and justice and things like this, I hope I'm portraying it correctly. If I'm not, then some theologian can come and correct me in the comments and hopefully speak to me, because theologians are cool, please. Gosh, that's such weird. Penal substitution is the idea that there's almost like a cosmic justice, right? And that there is, in some sort of genuine, almost like more real sense, like a guilt that is then taken by Christ, right? And people that don't believe in penal substitution don't necessarily believe that guilt's not a thing, right? Perhaps I'm making this come across the wrong way, but it's this idea that there's almost like a stain on us that uh, can only be sort of washed away. Well, not even, again, stain might be the wrong language even, but it's like there is a bounty on our heads, almost, and this can only really be undone if Christ pays for it through his sacrifice on the cross. Now, I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. I'm partial to the idea, but I have since seen it. There's definitely a technical name for this, actually. Give me a second. Yeah, so I couldn't find a name for this with my admittedly very brief Google search, but there has historically been this idea, and I believe one of the main people who puts it forth is actually Augustine, that evil is merely like a deprivation of good, essentially, because good is like an actual like thing, right? In a sense that the evil simply is not under this idea, and it sort of stems from God, and any like evil is merely the deprivation of good, essentially a lack of good, and this, this is why you get the idea that forgive me, I'm not firing on all cylinders today, I'll admit. This is, for example, you get this idea that actually hell is less of an active sort of punishment and more of a simple, this is the place where the good isn't, and you need to accept that goodness through like attaining to Christ. So that's like one justification for hell, right? Because people will challenge whether the idea of a hell is like right, because that's a whole different conversation, which leave a comment if you want it in a video, I guess, but I can't imagine that people would want to go into it, but I might go into it anyway, because sod it, it's my bloody channel. Getting ahead of myself. But yeah, so from the idea of evil as a deprivation of good, because again the idea is that all good will come from God, he is the source of goodness, right? I have so lost my train of thought. Right, okay, I've remembered that I was explaining the fall. I do not remember why, other than because it links to transness, right? And there's a vague link, but the exact sort of thing, I'm so out of it, man. I've been doing classes revision all day. But from this idea of evil as a deprivation of good, my idea of why there is evil in the world is because, rather than because we're like actively being punished, or because every evil thing is directly a result of our free will, because you get like free will defenses for the problem of evil, and it's like, well, okay, but nobody chose to put the earthquake there, so what are you yapping about? But if we're seeing evil as fundamentally a deprivation of good, it doesn't seem unreasonable to suggest that when we do wrong things, we're almost moving further from God, right? And you have to be careful with this, because there's also the idea that God is omnipresent and he's with us all the time, right? So you could argue that those two ideas are sort of in tension with one another, but I'd argue not. I think it would be quite hard to put simply, but it almost feels as though the sense in which God is with us, he's almost, I don't want to say incompletely so, but it almost doesn't work the same way as if the fall hadn't happened, right? Um, which I don't know. That's sort of the way that I've tried to conceptualize it for a while. Maybe someone will come along and correct me and say, I'm being a heretic, and I'm terribly sorry if that is the case. But yeah, I suppose what I was trying to get at is that is the other part of my explanation for why I am this way, and it's upsetting because it's like you're telling me I'd be a different person in an ideal world. I think that can be a hard thing. If you really, I think there's a problem. This is something that's bugged me for a while, actually. If you try and think about like a perfect version of yourself, maybe this is just me, but I find you end up losing a lot of what makes you you. Like if you were to try and draw out a version of yourself that's got no faults whatsoever, you almost end up with a different person. And I think that's something quite hard to swallow. I mean, especially in a situation like the one I'm in now, it can be, frankly, a difficult thing to balance. The idea that in a perfect world, a lot of the experiences which have formed the last year of my life wouldn't have happened because it's, I started experimenting with this in June. We're in April, so my gosh, it's almost been a year. I don't know. Maybe I'll be kicking myself if I ever watch this over again and think there's an easy answer, but it is weird to think that if we were in a world without sin, I wouldn't be trans. And that's not me saying that it's sort of sinful to be trans, but in a world without suffering, there wouldn't be this gap between what someone feels they ought to be and what they are, right? These would be the same, and it's written in some scriptures. I forgive me, I can't remember the book right now, but you see in some writings about the parousia, right, the second coming, that we're going to be given new bodies in the world to come, right? And I don't know. That's a weird thing to sort of think about. So yeah, that's how I've sort of. I hope I've explained it well, but my two reasons why I think I've turned out this way are essentially so that I can help other people that are in the same boat, and I think not to toot my own horn because one can always do more, but I'm proud to say that I have helped people. It's one of the very few things that I'm proud to say, is that I've helped people who are in similar situations, and I think it is a privilege, I've had the privilege to be the person that I wish I had when I was going through a lot of these things. The other thing, I've just realised I probably should have mentioned this, but in my last Sunday chats, the Easter one, I talked about going to a new church. I said the name of it. It was good. I'm thinking of moving there full time. Everything went well. It got to me more than I expected it to, actually, a lot more. But that wasn't bad, Everyone was lovely. I don't want to drag this up too much because, goodness me, this video is coming up to 20 minutes. And it's probably going to make no flipping sense. Lent's over, I can swear again. I tried to give up swearing for Lent and failed horribly. Probably shouldn't do it anyway. But, what more entrenched Christian tradition is there other than going back to doing things you probably shouldn't do at all because Lent's over? there, but yeah. So, on a personal note for a second, that church was lovely, intend to go again. Everyone was perfectly content about me downloading, so yeah, good time. Right, this has been a little bit more sort of, I mean, it's been bloody incoherent, and you can tell how out of practice I am with this sort of thing. But this has been a little bit more actually talking about theology and stuff, which, yeah, that's why I started this. And if you don't like it, then suck it up, frankly, because I've gone back to blinking a lot. Because I started this to talk about what was on my mind regarding the stuff I'm interested in. That's very much the philosophy, the theology, the politics, the jurisprudence. We're back. We are so back. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed. This took a while, I apologise for that. You hear my dog whining in the background, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. God bless.